Hello, in the words of my ancestors, Gingerwalla, and welcome to the State of the Service Roadshow for the Northern Territory. This is the 6th roadshow that we've had so far, and I believe there are 2 more to come. For those who don't know me, my name is Letitia Hope, and I'm your Emcee and facilitator today. Can I start by acknowledging no matter where you are, online or here, you are on the lands of First Nations people of this country. Today we are coming to you from Ngunnawal country in Canberra. Can I acknowledge all the elders of the Larrakia country and elders from all of the country where people are joining us online today. Can I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and of course can I acknowledge and welcome all of my Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander colleagues here in the room and online today, and welcome you all. So today is a really important day. We're very excited. We have a range of things that we're going to do today for this State of the Service Roadshow. But this is an opportunity for us to talk about the APS highlights and challenges, and also, more importantly, a forum for discussion. So today's address will start with a keynote from our Acting Deputy APS Service Commissioner, Rina Bruinsma, followed by a short video, and then we'll have a panelled conversation with some of my colleagues who are some here in Canberra and some across the country. We'll be joined by Wynne, who's coming from us from Perth, but I do understand is generally or normally located in the Northern Territory in beautiful Larrakia Nation. And of course, here in the room with me is Dr. Rachel Bacon. A little bit about that more in the future, but to start, can I just do a little bit of housekeeping? So if you have any issues, please send us a message via the GovTeams chat box. The chat box is also where you can send questions or thoughts for the panel session. And we do encourage you to put your questions through today with this great opportunity for us to have a conversation in this forum. So it is now my pleasure to hand over to the Acting Deputy Australian Public Service Commissioner, Rina Bruinsma, for the Commissioner's address. Thanks, Rina.
Thanks, Letitia. Good morning, Northern Territory. It is so good to be with you virtually today. I was very privileged to be a speaker at the State of the Service Roadshow in the Northern Territory in Darwin a number of years ago, and I remember it was beautifully humid, it was 30 degrees, and I was walking along the jetty with a beautiful stingray just accompanying me in the water, flying along beside me. It's such a magical place. And it's with that memory that I also wanted to thank and acknowledge the traditional custodians and elders upon the lands on which we're all meeting today from my home in Canberra. We have so much to gain collectively from a continuation of the cultural and educational practices of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. And in this spirit, I also want to extend a welcome and thank you to those Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining us today. So today, what's it all about? We're here as part of the annual State of the Service Roadshow. We're taking time to look back over the year we've just had, and we're going to be doing a little bit of looking towards the future. What a year it has been for everyone. So I think the word normal has been just put on its head over the past few years. 2 weeks ago, I was actually intending to fly to Darwin for work. My flight was cancelled because the airline actually ran out of pilots. Now, who would have thought that would have happened, 3 or 4 years ago? But today, it wasn't actually that unexpected. We just get on with it. It's a new type of normal. The first thing I wanted to do when we think about the year that's been is to acknowledge and thank each of you. Despite the pandemics, natural disasters and chaos all over the world, you've continued to deliver for the Australian people. And as public servants, that's why we come to work every day, right? It's about delivering for the Australian people. And I wanted to acknowledge the way that you have done that over this time. And you've done it through some pretty significant challenges. So I know many of you worked from home, homeschooling children. You worked from home in the cupboard in the basement that you converted into your part-time office while people were delivering groceries to your house. And while the gamers in the next room were probably sucking up all your internet. I know we've all had those experiences through COVID. My particular experience was that my home office manager became my 70-kilo Great Dane, who very frequently just walked into the frame when I was having teleconferences. So my team are very familiar now with my dog. Let's start off the session by having a look at the year we've just had. So the APS itself works across 567 locations in Australia and overseas. That surprised me when I saw that number. We're everywhere. We're all over the place. We come from 97 agencies across 14 portfolios. In the beautiful sunny Northern Territory, the public service was 1,847 people strong. So you make up around 1% of the whole of the APS. But personally, I think you probably punch above your weight. The State of Service report paints a picture of a group of people in the Northern Territory who are very engaged. So it's obvious that you believe in what you do, you work beyond what's required of you, and you have the Australian people at the forefront of your mind. And that's something you can really be proud of, especially given all the challenges that we've faced over the past year. The world around us is moving so quickly. We're constantly needing to keep up with the pace of change and also the expectations of the people and the communities that we serve. And I think the pandemic has really only increased these expectations. If you think about, as a citizen, I already, before the pandemic, wanted every interaction with the government to be as easy as buying something on Amazon or dealing with my bank. During lockdown, I became very used to just shopping at 11 o'clock at night and expecting the shoes to be available to me the next day because that's a pattern that I started to adopt. So like many others, I want to be able to engage with government services at a time that suits me and from wherever it suits me. And I think that's now the expectation of many people in the community. So contactless, even though it was brought in for the COVID pandemic, I think it's actually here to stay. We now are expecting to have that option. And technology and data are, of course, more important than ever. We all have had to work in new ways and to think about how we work differently and where we work differently. And it's really emphasised that we do need an APS that is highly collaborative and we work as one organisation in dealing with those increasingly complex and connected issues. We do this best when we bring in a range of perspectives and experiences to the table. So to effectively serve modern Australia, we also need to reflect the diversity of the communities and people that we serve. And as you can see by the stats, I think it's true to say that this is still a work in progress. A future state is, I know that the future that we all aspire to is to have greater diversity across all of these different cohorts. And it isn't just about bringing in new people from different backgrounds, it's about having an inclusive culture in each and every team across our organisation. So for me, inclusive teams are ones that actually thrive on difference. They don't see it as a threat. They welcome that difference of opinion and perspectives. They actively seek out alternative views. They challenge themselves to look through the world through the eyes of others. And it's so important for delivering services and developing policies that really work for the Australian people. And of course, underpinning this, we need to continue to live the APS values each day when we come to work. I've seen so many organisations who develop very complex lists of desired values and behaviours, so I'm very lucky for us that we have a really simple acrostic. I remember that from grade 12. I learned that word acrostic, which is I care. So in your mind, you can think about, challenge yourself. Am I being impartial, committed to service, accountable, respectful, and ethical? These are the things that the people that we serve expect of us, and they hold us to a high standard. Of course, there are some practical reasons that we come to work every day. We do have a passion for service. We all want to make a difference, but we also have the practicalities of caring for ourselves and our families. Going forward, we're really going to need to make sure that we continue to be an employer of choice for good and talented people who have a heart for public service. It's not just about the pay, it's about how we bring our best every day. So knowing that our jobs are secure and that we have access to non-monetary benefits and we have access to flexible ways of working, I think is one way that we will attract and retain the best people. I think we can safely say that the public service 10 years from now is going to look very different from what it is today. And clearly it's going to require a very major focus on our people and building our capability. So I'd just like to walk through a few things in order of, to describe what we're doing to prepare for the future. A year ago, we launched the APS Workforce Strategy. So you can see that up on your screens, and that's available on our website. I like to think of the strategy as setting out the playing field and the goalposts from now until 2025. It looks at the 97 agencies that we work for as a single enterprise. How collectively do we make sure that we can tackle the challenges that we face? There are 3 areas of focus. So first of all, it's about attracting, building and retaining skills, experience and talent. It's also about embracing data, technology and new ways of working. And it's about strengthening our integrity and purposeful leadership. For those of us who are not in executive or HR roles, you may be asking, okay, so what does this document or this strategy mean for me? And if I could sum it up, I think it's about challenging yourself to take on new learning and development opportunities and to approach your manager to discuss these. And for managers, it's about being a really great manager who invests time in the learning and development of your team. Take time for regular, meaningful conversations with your staff. All of us need to take every opportunity to be informed, skilled, qualified, inclusive, and a great asset to the organisation that we work for. Alongside the workforce strategy, we know that digital and ICT transformation will play a significant role in the future. The digital government strategy sees the government using more advanced technology to meet the needs and expectations of the public. So it's about offering stable, secure and reliable services. One aspect of this is how we share and reuse digital capability. So instead of every agency building new systems and building new platforms, if one agency invests in a new technology or a new design pattern or a new skill, we want the rest of the APS to be able to leverage that. So it's about sharing what makes sense to share. To support this vision, the Digital Transformation Agency has conducted a digital review. This basically provides a baseline for the digital and ICT capabilities that we have across the APS. And I guess the point I'd like to make about the digital review is that it's important that each one of us, no matter what stage of our career, are able to operate confidently in this evolving digital world. Recently, the digital profession, which is a team of around 30 staff from the Digital Transformation Agency, joined me and my team at the Australian Public Service Commission. And their role is to really help all of us build this capacity and capability across the whole service. And I have to say, thanks to this team, I am learning new skills every day. My favourite toy now is digital whiteboarding, which I didn't know existed before. I'm a very visual person and I love that I can workshop ideas. I have a staff member who works in Townsville. He and I can get on a whiteboard together and we can workshop ideas virtually, which is something that I probably wouldn't have done, even 2 years ago. Sometimes I really wish I could go to Townsville because I think the weather there would probably be much more conducive to my productivity than the weather here in Canberra. I also want to mention the importance of data in this new world of work. There is an Australian data strategy, and this is all about helping us use data in ways that will help us become a leading digital economy by 2030. For about 14 months, I worked with the National Bushfire Recovery Agency after the Black Summer bushfires. And one thing that I know really affected people who had their lives turned upside down by these catastrophic fires was they had to keep retelling their story to every service provider. So the local charity, the state government, the council, and then the national government, and not-for-profits along the way. So I guess putting it into perspective, imagine a world where our data was safely and securely communicated to those who need to know about it with the sole purpose of helping us out. That's where we want to get to. So the data strategy is to help us move towards that sort of utopia. Of course, as public servants, we are entrusted with a lot of sensitive information. And we need to know how to make best use of this information to deliver the right programs and services to those who need them. It's really critical that all of us continue to grow our skills and so we can make the best use of data in our roles, wherever our roles might be. To help us reach our personal potential, we have launched the APS Academy, and I'm hoping that you're aware of the APS Academy, and if not, that after this session you'll actually go and check it out. It's basically a hub of learning for employees at all stages in their career. In Canberra, the team that runs the Academy is largely located at the Museum of Australian Democracy over at Old Parliament House. It's a great heritage-listed building. So the carpet, the bathrooms, the clocks on the walls, which incidentally no longer work, these are treated as reminders of our incredible history. I'd like to point out too that there's some really weird aspects to the building. So there's doorbells that seem to sit on the walls, and when you press them don't make a sound, and we don't know where that sound goes. I've pressed them on a number of occasions, and I'm wondering if somewhere in a basement somewhere I'm really annoying someone with meaningless alarms. If you're ever in Canberra, please come to visit us at the Museum of Australian Democracy. We'd love to take you on a tour. You might be asking, so what's different about the Academy? It's where you learn APS craft. These are the things that every public servant needs to know to do their job really well. And you can see the sorts of things that we're teaching on the screen there. Integrity, working in government, engagement and partnership, implementation and services, strategy, policy and evaluation, leadership and management. Under each of these craft areas, you can access learning and development opportunities irrespective of your location or the stage of your career. A couple of quick examples, doing some foundational training in integrity or doing some work on what it means to deliver great policy. You don't need to be working in a policy area to have a great understanding and appreciation of what policy is all about. The Academy is also running courses in human-centred design and engaging with stakeholders. I was really excited that through the recent budget, the APSC received funding to roll out new data and digital literacy and fluency training for the whole of the APS. This is going to be available in 2023, and it will allow all of us to lift up our capability. I know some of you are already experts, we won't make you go through it again, but for me I'm really looking forward to doing some digital training so that I can keep pace and actually help be a leader of digital transformation. Through the Academy, we're also developing an EL2 professional development program. So I think the expectations of us as managers has changed throughout the pandemic. The ability to effectively manage dispersed and virtual teams is now par for the course. So the new program will help our very important middle managers brush up on existing capabilities and skills that are needed to manage effectively, but also learn some of these new skills and ways of working. We're looking to roll that program out later this year, and you can look out for details on the Academy website. So how do you know that you're getting a good product through the Academy? We actually have a faculty. So the APS Academy faculty is made up of respected current and recent APS senior practitioners. They guide the design and the delivery of Academy programs. So you know that what you're doing is relevant and that it's also very high quality. The Academy is all about embedding a culture of continuous learning. You can read about this in the APS Learning Development Strategy and Action Plan, which you'll also find on our website. I encourage you to think about new ways that you would like to develop in your career and to check out what is on offer. Set yourself a goal, discuss it with your manager as part of your performance and development plan, and be proactive. Don't be afraid to invest in yourself. And managers, engage with your staff on this topic. It might not be training. It might actually be doing something like joining one of the APS professions. There are 3 professions that you can join. They relate to HR practitioners, digital experts, and data experts. Through the professions, you can join a community of like-minded public servants for networking, events, and online collaboration. So if you haven't signed up yet, I encourage you to do so through the APSC website. I recently joined the digital profession to challenge me to acquire new skills, and I'm learning a lot about agile project management, user-centred design, and my favourite, graphic facilitation. It's a lot of fun. Of course, a public service needs to have the right mindset and structure to allow us to operate as effectively as possible. I often hear staff talk about levels of decision making and the time it takes to clear documents or to get traction with an idea. And having worked in the private sector previously, it was all very new to me, public sector. So something I did want to let you know about is the Independent Hierarchy and Classification Review. The review looked at how we can work in more streamlined ways, so with less hierarchy, improved mobility, and ways that engage more effectively with risk and ultimately support improved decision making. So the review had two elements. One obviously relates to culture, and the other is about structure. The pandemic already showed us that we can work differently, so our culture has shifted. We are engaged with risk because we have to be engaged with risk. We tried new ways of working. We need to make sure that those gains, however, continue to go forward and that we don't revert back to old ways of working. And in terms of structure, structural change actually doesn't happen very often in the public service. In the 120-year history of the service, the classification system that we have today is a result of only two major reforms: a shake-up in the late 80s and then a move to the current APS and executive level structures in 1998. So it is timely, and some might say essential, to ask whether our existing structure still supports or inhibits our capacity for innovation, agility and delivery. The final report and recommendations from this review will be presented to government after the outcomes of the election are known. So you'll hear more about it after that takes place. But I'm really excited about the idea that we are open to changing the way we've always done things so that each of us can have a little more skin in the game. The next part of my presentation will talk about the future. Like employers globally, we're facing skills shortages. 71% of agencies have said they have critical skills shortages, with data and digital being the most frequently reported. We do have some really great, successful entry-level programs where we take in high school graduates, apprentices, cadets, interns and university graduates. You can find out more about those on the Career Pathways website on the APS Jobs site. I joined the APS as a grad and I'm so amazed by the range of opportunities that have been available to me. I've visited prisons, developed programs for ex-offenders, I've worked on employment programs for people with disability, and as I mentioned, worked very closely with communities on the Black Summer response. So our entry-level programs allow students and graduates to set their academic qualifications and to use them in a real-world setting, learning the APS craft while also furthering their development. Most of our participants, however, are asked to move to Canberra. So coming from Queensland, that was a bit of a shock to me. I never really acclimatised to the Canberra winter. So I'm really excited to let you know that in the budget, we received funding to shift the dial, and we're going to set up APS Academy campuses alongside some of the universities in regional areas and outside of Canberra. And they'll focus on allowing data and digital cadets, apprentices, interns and grads to join the public service without leaving their community. We'll have supervisors on site and we'll have close relationships with the university to ensure that students have the flexibility to balance their studies with their new APS career. Those campuses will be up and running in 2023, and you'll be pleased to note that when I was recently on my way to Darwin, it was for the purpose of having discussions about those campuses with the Charles Sturt University and to gauge their interest. I won't spoil the outcomes for you, but when I spoke about the airline running out of pilots, that was the journey that I was on at the time. It's interesting to note that when we advertise for data and digital roles, we mostly do so in Canberra, whereas 90% of the talent for those roles is actually not in Canberra. So we need to reconsider where we work. COVID taught us that we can work at scale from locations other than Canberra or city-based offices, and the use of flexible working arrangements in the APS, including working from home, predates COVID and will be a mainstay for the APS to be seen as an employer of choice. Hybrid work will almost certainly be a feature of a contemporary APS. I'd love you to think about the things that worked well during COVID and to keep practicing and learning from those things. Of course, we need to get the balance right between flexible work and delivering on behalf of the government and the Australian people. It will look different depending on your role. If you need to access a protected space or you're a frontline officer, your arrangements may look different to people who work in the back office or have a policy role. At the end of the day, though, we need to make sure that teams are supporting one another and we're delivering on the expectations of the government. One of the great things about working in place is that it can also bring us closer to the communities we serve and help improve service design and delivery. Another success that we had through COVID was the APS Surge Reserve. So this is when public servants were redeployed across the APS at a pace and scale never before seen. More than 4,500 people have been deployed over the past 2 years to help out with priority work that they normally wouldn't have access to. So processing disaster payments to Australians as a result of the floods, processing COVID payments and assisting with other government priorities. The Surge Reserve is a great example of how we are better when we work together as one, when we remove those traditional barriers and silos. If you haven't had an opportunity to participate in Surge, why don't you have a look at the Surge Reserve on the website? Staff can generally now work in situ, which means that training is provided by the host agency, but with Services Australia, we've actually had staff being able to work from home or from their usual office rather than relocating to a Services Australia premises. This is the APS at its best, when all of us work together for whatever is the most pressing need at the time. I'll finish up quickly just by talking about the caretaker period, as we all eagerly await the outcomes of the upcoming election. It's a great time to reflect on the very important relationship between the public service, ministers and their officers. How we manage this transition in an election context is one of the ways that we prove that we are acting with impartiality and we demonstrate our wider stewardship. For those of you who are outside of Canberra, you may not be aware of it, but many of us are busily compiling what we call the incoming government briefs. So we prepare a brief that is available to the new minister or a returned minister when they come in, so that they can understand their portfolio. And it's an opportunity for us to reflect back that we've heard what they have asked of us in their election platform, and that we're engaging with them actively to understand what their needs are. The smooth transition is fundamental for the safety and prosperity of Australians. More than that, though, a strong partnership between the APS ministers and their staff is the core of the Westminster system, and it operates at its best when characterised by mutual trust, respect and confidence. You may not have direct contact with ministers in your role, but you might be interested in a set of guides that have been published on our website to support the APS to establish strong partnerships. They cover working with ministers, the role of departmental liaison officers, operating environment of a ministerial office and ministerial transitions. You can find those under publications on our website. So in conclusion, thank you very much for being part of today's session. There will always be complex challenges for us to manage as public servants, and they will require us to work together and at our best. We need to work as one APS, harnessing the perspectives and the knowledge that each one of us brings to the table. We are world-class because of the sense of service that you embody and the values that guide your work. And for that, I wanted to say a very big thank you for the work that you do and wish you all the best in 2022. Thank you.
Thank you, Rina. And just a reminder that Rina will be part of our panel discussion very shortly. One of the themes that Rina just touched on was the One APS theme and how we're all working towards the same goal. At the end of last year, a short video was put together to celebrate and to showcase the diversity of the APS. So we're going to take a look at that now.
Hi, I'm Kanchi from Newcastle.
Hi, I'm Mark from Hobart.
I'm Yana from Canberra, which is Ngunnawal country.
I'm Simon from Brisbane.
I'm Kay and I work in Geelong, Victoria.
My name is Mirage and I'm based in sunny Nauru.
I'm Zara, based in Fitzroy Crossing, over 3,800 kilometres away from Canberra.
What One APS means to me is working towards something bigger than yourself.
Engaging, collaborating and sharing knowledge.
No barriers between agencies.
We already have a good history of coming together to solve complex problems.
Bringing all of that diversity that people bring with their backgrounds.
Through teamwork and collaboration.
This is One APS in action.
We provide face-to-face service support to our most vulnerable, remote, disadvantaged and Indigenous customers.
I've helped customers with bushfire claims, with flood claims, even cyclone claims.
Helping Australians from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds.
Bettering the lives of the Australian community. Like this little guy.
I want to have oneAPS that can demonstrate people with disabilities into leadership positions.
It's just been great to be part of oneAPS where we all work together.
Towards a common goal as oneAPS.
oneAPS.
So now it's time for us to move into our panel discussion. And as I indicated earlier, if you have questions for our panel, can you please put them through to our question and answer tab on GovTeams? But also, if there's a question that you see that you like, you can like it up by pushing the voted up button. As mentioned earlier, we have Dallas Wynne with us and Dr. Rachel Bacon joining us for our panel discussion. Dallas is the Director, Northern Territory at the Security and Estate Group within the Department of Defence, and he joins us from Perth today, over in the West. And Rachel is the Deputy Secretary, Regional Cities and Territories at the Department of Infrastructure, Regional Development and Communications. And thank you all for joining us today. And of course, Rina is joining our panel as well. So today, my first question is for you, Dallas. How can managers and leaders support more isolated APS staff to remain connected in the broader APS?
Thank you for that, and a great question. I was just running through my head only about 20 seconds ago when the fire alarm, evacuation alarm was going off. In fact, how I was going to deliver this from the street. It is important to acknowledge, I guess now more than ever, and to remain an employee of choice, how our people in the APS are at its core asset. Fostering and developing our people must be at the forefront of everyone's mind, and if we are to reform for a fit for the future APS. With the recent pandemic, we have seen a significant shift to remote working opportunities, and can I say what a great job the APS has done as oneAPS in a short space of time, coming together to achieve this. It has come with a lot of benefits, including technology, and afforded significant opportunities for many. It's come at a cost for others, the loss of in-office bonding to many, and a sense of isolation and loneliness for others. Personally, I am lucky. I can say I have felt more connected now more than ever with so many platforms we have to engage with. We have demonstrated we are at least as productive, if not more productive, post-pandemic. As leaders, we must provide and foster opportunities within our wider teams and organisations. These can be as simple as informal chats and personal conversations. In this new world, we need, we need to encourage our managers, our staff and our leaders to be more empathetic during our regular check-ins. By being open, we demonstrate our social connections. It's important to prioritise good mental health practices. It's about creating a shared sense of purpose that exists both in work and on a personal level. Take the time to celebrate our success, both minor and major achievements. These efforts of public recognition go a long way to individuals' worth and reaffirms people's statuses as a cohesive team, regardless of their locations. Some of the practical tools to remain connected as a broader APS group have included connecting people, groups and divisions to the shared sense of purposes around our collective APS priorities. We see improvements in workplace culture when employees feel connected to the meaning of their work. The fun stuff and the practical stuff that we can do is the use of the hundreds of platforms we now have available to us to connect both socially and professionally. Video calling instead of texting, online groups, digital games, online classes, and occasionally the old-fashioned telephone where we pick up the phone and have a conversation. Find the time and make the time for breaks for you and your staff. And finally, don't forget as leaders to have the conversations I'd go so far as to say over-communicate with staff. Not everyone is comfortable sharing personal or emotional information, so share something about yourselves. You'll be amazed how it opens lines of communications and networks to stay connected as groups. Thank you.
Thanks, Dallas. And that certainly builds on some of the lessons learned that Rina was talking about earlier, about some of the better practices that emerged out of our new working arrangements. Just staying on that theme of our dispersed locational environment, the next question's for Rachel. How can we help improve understanding of the operating environment in the Northern Territory for those of us who live in Canberra or elsewhere?
Thanks, Letitia. And thanks so much for having me. Hi to everyone in the NT. I was super excited to be invited on this panel, having lived for 3 years in Darwin and worked for the NT Public Service for 3 years. So it's great to be able to connect with people from my other home. The question, I think, about having an understanding of the NT, and this goes for lots of different places around the country, I think it's really important, a really important question for two reasons. The first is we're a national government, we're a federal government. And so the things that we do, whether it's designing, service delivery, solving problems for how we can do things better to support communities right around the country, or designing policies that apply nationally, we affect all Australians whenever we do those things. And we need to understand what are some of the, the really different and diverse operating environments right around the country, because they are really different. And we know that from, when we've lived in different places, how different places are, what the different challenges are, and it can range from the weather to the traffic to, housing options to the people that we interact with day to day when we live in different parts of the country. So we're a public service for all Australians and for all of Australia. So for that reason, I think it's really important to stand in the shoes and seek to understand other operating environments around the country. The second reason I think this is a really important question is because increasingly, and particularly over the last decade or so, I've noticed that the Commonwealth Government is really trying increasingly to have local impact in the policies it designs, in the decisions it makes, in its budget funding. Rina talked about a few of those things in the recent budget, huge budget for regional Australia. So as the Commonwealth is seeking to increasingly have local impact, we actually really need to understand what that means and have an understanding of different operating environments so that we can actually provide the best advice to the government of the day. In terms of, how do you actually do it? I think there's a few things. I think long term, and this kind of goes to some of the recommendations that we've seen in different reviews of the public service. I think there's a lot to be said for increasing flexibility in the interplay between Commonwealth public servants, state public servants, working on the Hill in ministers' offices, working in the private sector. Rina, you mentioned you'd had that experience. And I think there's an awful lot to be said for having more porous boundaries between the different spheres of public service, which is not just the Australian public service or state public services. There's local government, there's private sector, there's not-for-profits, etc. So I think long-term, one of the things that I'd be really excited to see is having more movement. And, the experiences that I've had working as a Commonwealth public servant and also working as a Territory public servant, I learnt so much in my 3 years in the NT, working in the NT public service. And so I'd really encourage that broader movement for people trying different things and bringing those experiences back into the APS, which will make it a richer and more diverse workplace with more multiple perspectives. In the medium term, one of the things that I did a lot, particularly when I was working in the NT, was actually seek to work on joint projects across jurisdictional boundaries. I don't think we do that enough in the public service. And I think, when we're working on really difficult problems, when we're trying to tackle, unique issues, when we're delivering things that cut across particularly Commonwealth and state boundaries, I think there's an awful lot of merit in collecting groups of people together who live and work in different places and bring those different perspectives to the table. So thinking about with the things that we work on, are there any opportunities to to actually set up a joint project where we're working with people from different places, or it might even be different locations within the APS across different agencies. I'm a huge fan of those collaborative styles of working. And then in the short term, I'd say visit, if you've got opportunities to go visit different places, and I'd say that particularly there, I'm not really talking to you guys, I'm talking to my Canberra colleagues. We, as I mentioned, had a huge outcome in the latest budget for regional development investment, and that included $2.6 billion in a significant infrastructure-led regional development package for the Northern Territory. So as soon as we were able, going into caretaker, we have 7 ministers in my portfolio, I support 6 of them, but we got our secretary, 2 of my deputy colleagues, and the first place we went was Darwin. So last week, all of us were in Darwin talking with Northern Territory colleagues about the delivery of some really significant investments for the NT. So those kinds of trips, you know, sitting down with people. We also sat down with our staff in Office of Northern Australia and Arts. And hello to my colleagues if you're there. It was great to see you last week. But I think those things are really important to make those connections and have those conversations. And the other part of that, I think, is just really listening when we're talking to colleagues who bring those different perspectives, because they are all really valuable. So thanks for the question.
Great, thanks Rachel. So Rina, a lot in both of the answers so far: diversity, working in place and understanding place, mobility, both within the Commonwealth and across jurisdictional collaboration. So in that context, do you think in the future there will be an increase of APS staff working in remote and regional Australia?
Thanks, Letitia. My answer to that is a resounding yes. In addition to the measure that I mentioned in the budget about us establishing APS Academy campuses, as part of the regional package that Rachel just spoke about, we also received funding to establish multi-agency offices in regional Australia. So these offices will have workstations where, regardless of which department or agency you work for, you can be part of a team that is in a location that agency doesn't otherwise have a footprint. So we're really excited that this pilot will set up at least 4 of these new APS hubs starting in 2023. And then we will also have the 4 APS Academy campuses to complement that, so that you can see that the first steps are already being taken. The skills shortages that we're facing means that we can't ignore the talent that sits in local communities. And one of the great things about the APS hubs is it's a great benefit to the community as well, because the wages, the public sector wages, actually stay in that community. The staff there are working alongside stakeholders within their community. So there's great benefits to be had, not only for the public service, but for communities as well.
Thanks, Rina. And now we've got some questions from those of our colleagues who are online, and I might start with Dallas. This is actually a question to the whole panel. But the question from our colleagues today is: work intensity, fatigue and burnout are increasing issues across workplaces. Any thoughts about the management of these challenges while balancing expectations of government and the public? I'll start with you, Dallas.
Well, that's a nice, easy one to start with, isn't it? You're 100% right. The need and desire for reprioritisation of our works and the welfare of our people, it must be at the forefront of what we need to do. We need to be smarter about how we achieve our priorities and cascade that message to our senior leaders about the priorities that we have with the people we have.
And it touches on some of your answer to our first question, Dallas, in terms of welfare and self-care, in terms of reaching out to people, staying connected within these diverse and dispersed workforces, the human side of what we do in connections and relationships, both within our teams and across our portfolios. Rachel, any comments from you on this one?
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic question. I've been working really hard for the last, 15 years or so, since having kids working part-time and now working full-time again as my kids are a bit older, just on how do you actually make your work life sustainable. And for me, I've actually been doing a lot of thinking around what's a new concept for me around managing my energy. So thinking about kind of where I get my positive energy, and for everyone that's different. I get my positive energy from this kind of thing. I love talking with people, from extroverted thinking. Rina, you mentioned whiteboarding. I love that. Other people hate it and, get positive energy from kind of really detailed work and tracking down problems. And we can all play to our strengths in different ways by being part of a team. And interestingly, I think, in addition to thinking about how I manage my energy, I think it's also about taking our leave. We're often looking at our leave figures across our teams. Some people have accumulated an awful lot of leave. I think there's a lot to be said for really encouraging everybody and also leading by example there of making sure that we take leave and have time to recharge and spend doing other things that give us energy in other ways. But the last reflection, I was talking to a colleague of mine who was saying, taking leave and taking breaks alone isn't actually enough. One of the things that really helps people recuperate, recharge, is actually a sense of connection and very personal connection. And that includes a sense of connection with our teams. So it's kind of what, Dallas, you were talking about earlier of how do we actually, if we're feeling a bit isolated, how do we overcome those things? I think part of that recharging is actually about maintaining really good connections with our teams, because the benefit, one of the things I love about working in the APS is that we're always part of a team. We're never on our own in terms of the really difficult challenges we face or the problems we're trying to solve. So I think thinking about ways that we can actually stay connected and make an effort to connect with our team, even if it's just saying, hey, how are you going today, is a really important part of it.
Great, thanks Rachel. Just building on that, as somebody who's just come back from leave, a former secretary once told me that my career is a marathon, not a sprint, and we'd like you on the track for a very long time. So I think that taking leave and giving it permission to take leave, but also staying connected is really fundamental. Rina, comments from you?
Thanks, Letitia. I think there's two things that have already been mentioned. So Dallas has mentioned the need to prioritise. There will always be a queue of work that is longer than the day that you have. So it is really important to have those conversations with your manager about, where can I add the most value and what can I achieve. The second part of it is all those things you cannot control. So there's the world of the things that we can control, and as human beings we like to be in control. Then there's that world of things that we cannot control, and how do we actually make ourselves comfortable with the idea that things are going to come at us from different angles. There's actually a lot of great support out there. A lot of programs, wellness programs, you've got, I know most of us have used the EAP at some point in our life. So it's about taking responsibility for your own care and for those of your team. Looking out for people and saying, are you okay? I think you probably need to slow down. Have you thought about, doing some sort of wellness activity with your team? And throughout the pandemic, one of the great pieces of advice that I got was start every day with a phone call to someone that is not work related, but who is at your work. So just to connect in with someone. And it was interesting to understand that most of us were all feeling exactly the same way, a little bit unsure. And we were all trying to cope with this new normal that we were experiencing. So again, it's about, control what you can, don't sweat the small stuff, and take care of yourself and your team members.
Great. Thanks, Rina. So, Rina, you mentioned before the Academy, and as one of the inaugural faculty members, I think the Academy is fantastic, and it is about the art and the craft of being a public servant. I guess one of the questions I wanted to kind of ask you about is our employment value proposition, and, we've got recruitment to be done, skills to be added, staff to be trained. What are your thoughts on the employment value proposition for the public service? What is the attractant for us as an employer?
Yeah. We know from our census results that for the majority of us, we have a real sense of connection to the purpose of what we're doing. We actually join the public service because we want to make a difference. That in itself, though, going forward, it needs to be probably more than that, because people can serve the Australian public in many different ways, and we want to be the employer of choice. So for me, the Academy is a great way of showing how we invest in the individual, so providing opportunities, providing learning and development opportunities. The other aspect of the APS is that, we if you consider us as oneAPS, the opportunities that you have to move around the APS and to try different types of work. I've been amazed since I've been in the APS about the great diversity of roles available and the opportunity to actually move into roles. Maybe less so, I think, in the states and territories where I think a lot of the work is very service delivery based. But that's why I would encourage you to think about what skills do you want to learn to make yourself valuable to, policy work or regulatory work or some other of the jobs that tend to happen in Canberra, noting that, Canberra is hungry for talent. We really need people who can work confidently and comfortably remotely from us, but actually contribute to different types of work. The other thing is that our flexible work arrangements, they've always been there even prior to COVID. We've learned that we can work differently, and I think that needs to remain part of our employee value proposition. I think different generations have different expectations of how they will work, and certainly younger generations are growing up now doing even school through remote and working from home. So people will have a different expectation of how much time they spend in the office, and we need to think more about outcomes-based productivity, not time spent at a desk. So that's some of my thoughts, Letitia.
Great, thanks, Rina. Dallas, you work in the Northern Territory. So Rachel and Rina have both touched on kind of cross-jurisdictional collaboration. What would be some of your thoughts about how do you make that happen in a place-based environment? What does that look like?
Relationships and opportunities has been in the forefront, and I build on Rachel's comments on the joint jurisdictional projects. They're fantastic. They're a great way to achieve something bigger than yourself through a diverse workforce and other departments, meet new people. We do need to find more projects that are available across multiple jurisdictions. Now, through the networks and the people and these types of forums, there are opportunities to brainstorm, to bring people together and come up with these sorts of opportunities. So the ones I've done with NT government have been quite well received and quite well rewarded as well. So I only applaud people to get out there and find those opportunities.
Thanks, Dallas. Rachel, you've worked across multiple jurisdictions. Any thoughts to add on this one?
I've done a couple of really cool projects, Dallas. When I was working at NT Chief Ministers, we got together people from, we're working on competition policy, which kind of sounds like, well, how could you do a kind of joined up, Commonwealth State project on competition policy? Sounds pretty boring, to be honest, but in actual fact, we're really worried from an NT perspective because the markets in the NT are incredibly thin. And if you compare markets in the NT to markets in Sydney and Melbourne, they're really different and the operating environment is incredibly different. And so if you're going to do, for example, road user charging as part of competition policy, it's not going to work on the roads to, East Arnhem or over the border to Kununurra or something like that. So we really had a strong objective of kind of making sure that everyone had a shared understanding of the really different operating environments that competition policy reform was going to play out in. And we did a joint project with Commonwealth Treasury, New South Wales Treasury, and ourselves, and it was fantastic. It was and I think our colleagues in Commonwealth Treasury really appreciated the insights and the perspectives and the enhanced knowledge that came from that project. There's another one I could talk about that we did on NDIS and the rollout in East Arnhem, but they're super fun and you get to meet really great people and actually do meaningful things, bringing multiple perspectives to the table, and that's what I think the value is.
Great, thanks Rachel. Rina, mobility. Any last thoughts on mobility, since that's the conversation we've been talking about?
Yeah, so we need more of it. I would really encourage teams to think about the benefits of mobility. It's not mobility for mobility's sake. It's not just so that we can all just randomly move around the place. But we've spoken about the fact that we benefit from diverse perspectives. So spending time on secondment in an area that is new to you is so valuable. So my time with the National Bushfire Recovery Agency was an example of a secondment. I worked for the Department of Finance. I didn't have experience in emergency management, but but I had some of the skills that they needed because they were so focused on delivering responses to bushfire affected communities. They actually needed someone to sort of work the back office and help make sure the finances were okay and that the Bushfire Recovery Fund was being spent effectively. And it just opened my world to, opened my eyes to a whole new different world. And now I can say I've worked in emergency management. I understand that world and working across the states and territories. We are looking at enhancements to the APS Jobs website to encourage mobility opportunities. So these could be more formal secondments where you go for 3 or 6 months into a role. But we're also looking and we're trialling things like micro assignments. So through the digital profession, staff are able to put up their hand like you do on Airtasker and say, I've got a little bit of capacity, I want to learn new things, can we connect and can we collaborate on a project? So that's the sort of thing that we have a vision for APS Jobs, that like Airtasker, you could put up your hand and say, these are my skills and abilities, this is what I'm interested in, my manager supports me doing a commitment of this amount of time, and we can actually gain greater mobility, and that builds the capability of the whole service, not only the team, the person going into another team, but the team itself benefiting from their perspectives.
So we talk a lot about the APS being an ecosystem, so you know every role is connected to another role, from strategy to policy to service delivery, program management, regulatory functions, and the more you understand the art and the craft of our system and the way it works, the greater career options you have and the more professional value and purpose you can bring to your role. That brings our panel discussion to an end today, and I'd like to thank you all for both all the speakers, so Rina, Rachel and Dallas, thank you very much for joining us today. And I'd also like to thank you all for watching and contributing. And of course we understand that we haven't been able to answer all your questions, and we will be sharing the questions with the APSC executive and panel members. But just one last reminder, as Rina said in her address, that please go to the APS website and have a look at some of those incredible tools and resources that Rina has pointed out today. Thank you all again to the panel members, and have a great day, everyone.